Welcome to Sleepless Scientist, the channel where science meets serenity. The stars don't help you sleep. Maybe a quiet stroll through the mysteries of the human body will. Tonight, we'll be asking one of the oldest questions in biology. Quite literally, why do we age? What's behind the wrinkles, the slowing metabolism, the graying hair, and the eventual wear and tear of our cells? Tonight, I'll guide you through the fascinating, complex, and sometimes absurd tale of how time leaves its fingerprints on the human body. Thank you for tuning in. If this ends up ruining your sleep with too much thinking, I'm truly sorry. If it helps you relax, that's great. Either way, I'd appreciate it if you liked this video. Subscribe to the channel and dropped a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now, let's dive gently into the stream of time through the biology of aging. It begins before you feel it, long before your knees start clicking or your back betrays you for no reason. Aging has already been at work. The process starts at the cellular level, where life's dance is constantly choreographed by invisible molecular partners. The idea that aging is just the result of the body wearing out like an old machine is an oversimplification. Yes, parts of us do wear out, but the reasons why are far more subtle and intriguing. First, there's the matter of cell division. Every time your cells divide, they have to copy their DNA. But this copying isn't perfect. At the end of each strand of DNA are little protective caps called telomeres. These telomeres act like the plastic tips at the ends of shoelaces, preventing the DNA from unraveling. Unfortunately, every time a cell divides, the telomeres get shorter. When they become too short, the cell can no longer divide. It either dies or enters a state known as senescence, where it just sits there, not contributing much, sometimes even leaking harmful signals. In newborns, telomeres are long and healthy. By the time we reach old age, they're significantly shorter. Research has shown that the average telomere length in newborns is around 10,000 base pairs. In elderly adults, this can shrink to 5,000 base pairs or less. That's not a coincidence. It's a biological countdown timer, ticking away in every cell. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. Aging is not caused by a single mechanism. It's more like a combination lock, with many dials turning slowly but surely. Another dial is mitochondrial dysfunction. Mitochondria are the energy factories of the cell, converting food into usable energy, but they're messy workers. In the process, they release reactive oxygen species, also known as free radicals. These molecules are unstable and can damage cellular components, including DNA, proteins, and lipids. The free radical theory of aging, proposed in the 1950s, suggests that the accumulation of this damage over time contributes significantly to aging. Think of it like tiny sparks flying out of an engine, slowly melting the car from within. While antioxidants can neutralize some of these sparks, they can't catch them all. Over time, the damage accumulates, and the machinery of life becomes less efficient. Then there's the immune system. It too declines with age in a process called immunosenescence. The number and function of immune cells decrease, which explains why older adults are more vulnerable to infections, cancer, and autoimmune diseases. For instance, the thymus, an organ that produces T cells, shrinks dramatically after puberty. By age 65, it's often reduced to a fraction of its original size. This means fewer new T cells, which are crucial for adaptive immunity. That's also why vaccines are often less effective in the elderly. And what about the skin, the organ that wears our age most visibly? Collagen production slows down as we age, and the skin loses elasticity. The sun doesn't help either. Ultraviolet rays penetrate the skin and create even more free radicals. It's called photoaging, and it can make someone's biological skin age appear decades older than their chronological age. A person with significant sun exposure may show skin aging 20 to 30% earlier. than someone who has avoided direct sunlight. But aging isn't just physical. The brain changes too. Memory slows, recall weakens, and learning new things becomes harder. The hippocampus, which plays a key role in memory formation, shrinks with age. In healthy adults, the brain loses about 5% of its volume per decade after age 40. That's not all from watching TV, unfortunately. The loss of neurons, the buildup of protein tangles like tau, and plaques of beta-amyloid, particularly in Alzheimer's, contribute to cognitive cognitive decline. Now, let's entertain a strange twist. If aging causes so many problems, why haven't we evolved a way to prevent it? Evolution doesn't care about old age. In fact, natural selection is most powerful in youth, the age when we reproduce and pass on our genes. This idea is central to the evolutionary theory of aging. As long as an organism survives long enough to reproduce, its genes get passed on. Anything that happens afterward isn't subject to strong evolutionary pressure. In other words, nature has no incentive to keep you fresh past your prime. It's not cruel, just indifferent. This is why some species live fast and die young. Consider the mayfly, whose adult life lasts only a few hours. It mates, lays eggs, and that's it. On the flip side, certain animals age remarkably slowly. Take the naked mole rat, a small wrinkly rodent that can live over 30 years and barely shows signs of aging. Or the Greenland shark, which can live over 400 years. Scientists still don't fully understand why these animals resist aging, but they offer important clues. Then there's the paradox of caloric restriction. Studies in mice, worms, and monkeys have shown that reducing calorie intake without malnutrition can extend lifespan significantly, in some cases by up to 40%. The mechanism isn't fully understood, but it seems that when the body is in a low-energy state, it becomes more efficient, repairs itself more effectively, and produces fewer damaging byproducts. Humans aren't mice, but preliminary research suggests similar trends. However, eating 30% fewer calories every day isn't exactly everyone's idea of fun. Aging isn't just biological, it's also cellular miscommunication. Our bodies are made of trillions of cells, all talking to each other through chemical signals. With age, this communication becomes faulty. Signals for cell growth, repair, and death become scrambled. It's like a city where the traffic lights have stopped working, chaos ensues. Damaged cells stick around too long. Healthy cells stop dividing, and tissues begin to malfunction. This leads us to inflammaging, a term coined to describe the chronic low-level inflammation that accompanies aging. Unlike the sharp pain and redness of a fresh wound, this inflammation is silent and persistent. It quietly damages tissues and contributes to diseases like atherosclerosis, type 2 diabetes, and Alzheimer's. In older adults, levels of inflammatory markers like interleukin-6 and C-reactive protein tend to be higher, even without active infection. So, what do we have so far? Telomere shortening, mitochondrial damage, immune system decline, protein buildup, faulty communication, chronic inflammation, and evolutionary apathy. It's like an orchestra playing slightly out of tune, each section contributing a small disharmony that adds up to the full, bittersweet symphony of aging. But don't lose hope just yet. Scientists are working hard to understand the biology of aging, not just to prolong life, but to extend health span, the period of life spent in good health. After all, what's the point of living to 120 if 40 of those years are spent battling disease? There are even experiments underway involving gene therapy, stem cell treatments, and compounds that mimic the effects of caloric restriction. Some of the research is promising. For instance, in mice, tweaking a single gene related to cell division can significantly extend lifespan. Whether these findings will translate to humans remains uncertain, but the field of geroscience, the study of aging itself is growing rapidly. And as we explore these scientific breakthroughs, we're also confronting one of humanity's oldest dreams, the dream of living longer, healthier lives. Not immortality, perhaps, but something a little closer to timelessness. Aging, as it turns out, is not just a biological misfortune or a ticking countdown. It is, in many ways, a carefully balanced compromise. Our bodies are machines built with an expiration date, not because nature was careless, but because it was optimizing for something else entirely: reproductive success and short-term survival. To understand this more clearly, consider a concept called antagonistic pleiotropy. This mouthful of a term describes a situation where a gene has beneficial effects early in life, but harmful ones later on. One famous example is the p53 gene. It helps protect us from cancer by instructing cells with DNA damage to stop dividing or to self-destruct. This is fantastic in our youth, keeping our bodies clean of rogue mutations. But in old age, that same protective instinct may lead to excessive cell death or reduced regeneration, contributing to tissue decline. So the gene is a double-edged sword, helpful early, harmful later. Nature favors the early benefit because that's when reproduction happens. It's a brutal but efficient calculus. This theory of trade-offs is echoed in other systems too. For example, testosterone in men boosts muscle mass, libido, and competitive behavior, traits that enhance reproductive chances. But higher lifetime levels of testosterone are also linked to an increased risk of prostate issues and cardiovascular disease later in life. Again, evolution leans toward what benefits survival up to the point of reproduction, not beyond. But let's step back and ask another fundamental question. Why do organisms die at all? There are species that seem to escape this curse, at least for a while. The hydra, a tiny freshwater creature, doesn't show signs of aging in the traditional sense. In laboratory conditions, it can theoretically live indefinitely. It reproduces asexually, has an impressive ability to regenerate, and seems to avoid the cellular damage that afflicts more complex organisms. Then there's the immortal jellyfish, Turritopsis dohrnii. When faced with injury or stress, it can revert its cells to an earlier developmental state, essentially starting over. It's as if a burned-out office worker could morph back into a toddler and reset their life. Of course, in the wild, predators and environmental factors usually catch up to even the most biologically ageless creatures. Still, these examples suggest that aging is not inevitable in every form of life. It's just a common solution among complex multicellular organisms. Back in the human realm, aging doesn't unfold evenly across the body. Different tissues and organs age at different rates. For example, the cardiovascular system starts to show age-related changes fairly early. Arteries stiffen, and the heart may become less efficient at pumping blood. This increases the risk of hypertension, heart failure, and stroke. In fact, cardiovascular disease remains the leading cause of death globally, accounting for an estimated 17.9 million deaths per year. Much of that risk is tied to the gradual wear and tear of aging blood vessels. The skeleton ages too. Bone density peaks in your 20s and starts to decline afterward. By the time people reach their 70s, they may have lost 25% or more of their bone mass. This is particularly pronounced in women after menopause due to the drop in estrogen levels. Osteoporosis becomes a major risk, with fractures in the hip and spine contributing significantly to disability and reduced quality of life. The endocrine system, our network of hormone-producing glands, also gets in on the aging action. Hormone levels fluctuate and decline with age. Growth hormone, which helps build muscle and repair tissue, decreases significantly, leading to reduced muscle mass and slower healing. Insulin sensitivity can decrease as well, contributing to a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. The delicate balance of cortisol, thyroid hormones, and sex hormones becomes harder to maintain. And yes, even our sense organs betray us. Vision declines as the lenses in our eyes become less flexible and more opaque, leading to presbyopia and an increased risk of cataracts. Hearing diminishes due to the loss of hair cells in the cochlea. Taste and smell dull, affecting appetite and enjoyment of food. All these changes layer on one another like geological strata, each one subtly altering how we interact with the world. Emotionally and socially, aging is complex too. Older adults often report higher levels of emotional stability and life satisfaction, a phenomenon called the paradox of aging. Despite physical decline, they often experience less stress, better emotional regulation, and more contentment. This might be due to a shift in priorities, a reduced desire for novelty, or a refined understanding of what brings true fulfillment. In other words, the body may be wearing down, but the mind can still find new ways to thrive. Of course not. All aging is graceful. Neurodegenerative diseases, such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, are cruel reminders that aging can rob individuals of their identity. Alzheimer's affects more than 55 million people worldwide, and with increasing life expectancy, this number is projected to rise. The disease involves the buildup of abnormal proteins in the brain, particularly beta-amyloid plaques and tau tangles, which disrupt communication between neurons and eventually kill them. Interestingly, not everyone develops these diseases. And not everyone who has brain plaques ends up with symptoms. This suggests that aging is not just about the presence of damage, but also about the body's ability to compensate. Some people have what's called cognitive reserve, extra brain capacity that helps them maintain function despite the presence of damage. Factors that build this reserve include education, mental stimulation, physical activity, and social engagement. This leads us to the growing field of healthy aging. While we can't stop the clock, we can influence how it affects us. Regular physical activity, for example, is one of the most powerful tools available. Studies show that even moderate exercise can reduce the risk of chronic diseases, improve mood, enhance cognitive function, and increase longevity. In fact, walking just 30 minutes a day is associated with a 20 to 30% lower risk of death from all causes. Nutrition matters too. Diets rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, and healthy fats support aging at every level. The Mediterranean diet, in particular, has been linked to lower rates of heart disease, cancer, and cognitive decline. Hydration, adequate sleep, and stress management all play crucial roles as well. Then there's the social side. Humans are social animals, and loneliness is a hidden accelerant of aging. Chronic loneliness has been associated with increased inflammation, higher blood pressure, and even a greater risk of premature death. Older adults who maintain strong social connections tend to live longer and report better overall health. Technological advances are starting to offer additional hope. Scientists are investigating senolytic drugs, which are designed to selectively eliminate senescent cells, the so-called zombie cells that linger in tissues and secrete harmful chemicals. Early studies in animals have shown that removing these cells can improve health and extend lifespan. Human trials are now underway. Another promising area is epigenetics, the study of how genes are expressed without changing the underlying DNA. As we age, our epigenetic markers, chemical tags that regulate gene activity, become disorganized. This epigenetic drift contributes to the breakdown of cellular function. Some researchers are exploring ways to reset these markers to a more youthful state, essentially reprogramming cells. It sounds like science fiction, but initial results in lab animals have shown potential. Despite all these efforts, aging remains one of the greatest scientific mysteries. We understand more now than we ever have, yet many of the core mechanisms are still being unraveled. What is clear, however, is that aging is not a single process, but a symphony of interrelated changes. each one playing its part in the final performance. There is elegance in that, too. Aging is the price we pay for complexity, for the privilege of being made of trillions of cooperating cells rather than a single one. It is not a failure, but a reflection of life's layered nature. The fascinating truth about aging is that it doesn't just happen to us as individuals. It happens to entire systems and species, unfolding like a quiet, universal script written into the biology of life itself. Aging is not an accident, but a feature embedded within the fabric of living organisms. And just as it affects our bodies, it also subtly changes how we live, think, and experience the world around us. One of the more curious observations in the study of aging is something known as the mortality rate plateau. Normally, the risk of dying increases with age, but in certain species, and potentially in humans past extreme ages, this increase appears to slow down. For example, after the age of about 105. Some researchers have observed that the probability of dying each year stops increasing and levels off. It's as if the body has entered a new, bizarre status quo. We're not entirely sure why this happens, but it may suggest that beyond a certain point, the body stops actively deteriorating at the same pace. Of course, very few humans ever reach that plateau. According to the most comprehensive global data, the average life expectancy today is about 73 years. In more developed countries, it reaches into the mid-days. The longest confirmed human lifespan belongs to Jean Comment, who lived to 122 years and 164 days. She passed away in 1997, and since then, no one has officially broken her record. Whether there is a hard biological limit to human life, or whether we can extend it further, is still under investigation. We should also consider biological age versus chronological age. While the calendar tells you one thing, your cells might tell another story entirely. Two people who are both 65 years old may have very different biological ages depending on lifestyle, genetics, and environmental exposures. Tools like DNA methylation clocks attempt to measure biological age by analyzing how certain genes are turned on or off in your cells. These so-called epigenetic clocks have proven to be surprisingly accurate in predicting not just age, but also disease, risk, and overall health. One study known as the Denedan Multidisciplinary Health and Development Study followed over 1,000 people born in New Zealand in 1972. 1973, researchers tracked their health data for decades. What they found was that some individuals were biologically 10 to 20 years older than others of the same chronological age. These differences correlated strongly with lifestyle factors such as smoking, physical activity, diet, and stress. This brings us to the idea of resilience in aging. Some people, despite significant stress or hardship, maintain relatively youthful biological profiles. Others, under seemingly less duress, age faster. This is a stark reminder that aging is not just written in our genes, it's also shaped by our choices and circumstances. While we can't control everything, we can influence much more than we often believe. And then there's the microbiome, the vast community of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other microorganisms that live in and on us. These microscopic tenants are not just passive stowaways, they play an active role in digestion, immune function, and even mood regulation. Recent research has shown that the composition of the gut microbiome changes significantly with age. In healthy individuals, these changes are gradual and balanced. In unhealthy aging, the diversity of gut bacteria tends to decrease, leading to inflammation and reduced resilience. Interestingly, centenarians often maintain a gut microbiome that resembles that of much younger people. This suggests that microbiome health might be both a marker and a contributor to longevity. Studies in mice have even shown that transferring gut bacteria from young to old animals can improve health outcomes and reduce inflammation. Whether such interventions can be safely and effectively used in humans is still being explored. Another critical area is protein homeostasis, sometimes called proteostasis. Proteins are the workhorses of the cell, responsible for structure, signaling, transport, and countless other functions. As we age, the systems that manage protein folding and disposal become less effective. Misfolded proteins begin to accumulate, gumming up cellular machinery and contributing to diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Huntington's. In youth, the body has robust systems to handle these rogue proteins, such as the ubiquitin proteasome system and autophagy, a process that clears out damaged components and recycles them. But with age, these systems slow down. Imagine a city where the garbage trucks start skipping pickups. Over time, waste builds up, affecting every part of the urban landscape. The same is true in aging tissues. This progressive decline in cellular housekeeping leads to widespread dysfunction. Speaking of dysfunction, let's not forget the role of stem cells. These remarkable cells are responsible for regenerating tissues and maintaining organ function. In youth, they are plentiful and active. As we age, both their numbers and their functionality decrease. This decline means that when damage occurs, say a muscle tear or skin injury, the repair process becomes slower and less complete. It's why cuts heal more slowly and bones knit back together more gradually in older adults. The decline in stem cell activity is particularly noticeable in high-turnover tissues like the skin, gut lining, and blood. In fact, part of the reason we become more vulnerable to anemia, infections, and digestive problems as we age is because the stem cells responsible for renewing these tissues simply aren't as vigorous anymore. There are researchers actively looking for ways to reactivate or replace aging stem cells. Some experiments in animals have shown that introducing young blood or plasma components into older animals can partially rejuvenate tissues. While this idea gained a lot of attention in the media, it's still very early stage and not without serious ethical and safety concerns. Beyond the biology, the psychology of aging offers another dimension. With age comes a shifting sense of time. Studies have shown that older adults tend to focus more on emotional satisfaction and less on ambition or acquisition. This shift, called socio-emotional selectivity theory, suggests that when people perceive their time as limited, they prioritize deeper, more meaningful experiences. In that sense, aging might sharpen our focus rather than dull it. It compels us to cut through the noise and invest in what truly matters: relationships, memories, inner peace. That doesn't make the physical changes any easier, but it does hint at a compensatory wisdom that biology alone can't explain. Let's also acknowledge how aging varies across populations. Genetics play a role, but so does environment, income, access to healthcare, education, and social stability. In Japan, the average life expectancy is over 84 years. In some parts of sub-Saharan Africa, it's less than 60. These disparities are stark reminders that aging isn't just a cellular process. It's shaped by global inequality. A person's zip code can predict their lifespan more accurately than their genetic code in many parts of the world. Despite the challenges, humanity seems increasingly obsessed with extending life. Billion-dollar biotech startups now chase the cure for aging. High-profile figures fund moonshot projects to slow, reverse, or halt the biological clock. While some of these efforts are grounded in real science, others veer into the speculative. There's talk of cryonics, brain uploading, and digital immortality. But even if these ideas prove viable someday, they raise profound ethical and societal questions. If we could live to 150, should we? How would it affect population growth, employment, retirement, and intergenerational equity? Would only the wealthy have access to age-extending technologies, widening the gap between rich and poor? Would we lose the urgency to accomplish anything if time were no longer a constraint? Science may someday offer us more years, but wisdom will be needed to decide what to do with them. Aging, then, is not just a set of biological changes. It's a lens through which we view meaning, purpose, and the finite nature of life. And in its way, that finiteness is part of what gives life its poignancy. If we lived forever, would we value a sunrise, a kind word, a child's laughter? Perhaps aging, uncomfortable though it may be, is one of nature's most elegant design choices, a reminder that beauty is precious because it fades. As we deepen our understanding of aging, one recurring truth becomes clear. It is not simply about growing older, but about change, gradual, inevitable, and often invisible until it manifests outwardly. Aging is the body's evolving relationship with time, and like any long relationship, it comes with quirks, frustrations, adaptations, and, yes, a few remarkable surprises. Consider the skin, not just a protective layer, but the largest organ in the body, weighing about 8 pounds on average in adults and covering around 22 square feet. With age, it becomes thinner, drier, and less elastic. Collagen, the protein that keeps skin firm and plump, decreases by about 1% each year after age 20. Elastin fibers, which allow skin to stretch and bounce back, degrade more rapidly under UV exposure. This is why prolonged sun exposure in youth often leads to leathery, deeply lined skin in later decades. Even the hair on our heads changes over time. The pigment-producing cells in our hair follicles, called melanocytes, gradually stop producing melanin. As these pigment reserves are depleted, hair turns gray, silver, or white. This process begins at different ages, depending on genetics, but by age 50, about 50% of people have at least 50% gray hair. It's a rather tidy statistical coincidence known as the 5-0-5-0-50 rule. The texture of hair can change too, becoming finer or more brittle as the hair shaft thins and sebaceous oil glands produce less moisture. Beneath the surface, aging muscles tell their own story. Sarcopenia, the loss of muscle mass and strength with age, begins as early as the 4th decade of life. By the time individuals reach their 70s, they may have lost up to 30 to 50% of their muscle mass. This has serious consequences, not just for mobility and independence, but for metabolism and overall health. Muscle burns more calories than fat, so its decline contributes to age-related weight gain and reduced energy expenditure. But the decline in muscle is not just a matter of disuse. Even highly active older adults experience sarcopenia, suggesting intrinsic biological mechanisms at play. Hormonal changes, reduced protein synthesis, and the infiltration of fat into muscle tissue all contribute. Resistance training and adequate protein intake can slow this process, but they rarely stop it completely. Then there's the heart. At rest, a young adult heart pumps about 5 liters of blood per minute. With age, the heart's walls may thicken, and its ability to relax between beats decreases. The heart rate at rest doesn't change much, but the maximum heart rate during exercise declines. This means that the capacity for strenuous activity shrinks, even in well-conditioned individuals. Blood vessels become stiffer too, raising blood pressure and increasing the risk of heart attacks and strokes. The kidneys lose efficiency as well. Each kidney contains about 1 million filtering units called nephrons. Starting around age 40, the number of functioning nephrons begins to decline. By age 70, it's common to have lost up to 40% of total kidney filtration capacity. This doesn't always lead to kidney failure, but it does affect how the body handles medications, waste products, and fluid balance. Even the liver, one of the most regenerative organs in the body, slows down with age. Its size decreases, and its ability to metabolize drugs and toxins diminishes. This is one reason why older adults often need lower doses of medications, They simply don't process them as quickly. The digestive system also slows, with reduced production of digestive enzymes and changes in gut motility. Constipation becomes more common and nutrient absorption may decline. Sleep patterns shift as well. Older adults often find it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep. They may wake more frequently during the night and rise earlier in the morning. This isn't necessarily due to sleep disorders, but rather changes in the circadian rhythm and a lighter sleep structure. Deep sleep, also known as slow-wave sleep, tends to diminish with age, and while total sleep needs remain about the same, the architecture of sleep changes. And what of the brain, the master organ of thought, memory, and personality? Although the brain accounts for only about 2% of body weight, it consumes about 20% of the body's energy. As we age, the volume of the brain slowly decreases, particularly in areas associated with memory and executive function, like the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. These changes are part of normal aging, but they can still impact attention, processing speed, and the ability to learn new information. Interestingly, not all cognitive functions decline. Vocabulary, general knowledge, and emotional regulation often remain stable or even improve with age. This has led to a greater appreciation of crystallized intelligence, the accumulated wisdom and experience that grows over time, as opposed to fluid intelligence, which involves problem-solving and rapid reasoning. In other words, older brains may not be as quick, but they can be incredibly wise. Vision and hearing follow their own trajectory. The lenses in our eyes lose flexibility, a condition known as presbyopia, which makes reading fine print more difficult. The retina becomes less sensitive to light, and the risk of conditions like cataracts, macular degeneration, and glaucoma increases. Hearing declines due to the gradual loss of hair cells in the inner ear, particularly those that detect high frequencies. About 1 in 3 people between ages 65 and 74 has some degree of hearing loss, and the rate rises to nearly 1 in 2 for those over 75. All of these changes, though often gradual, add up. They affect independence, social interaction, and emotional well-being. But perhaps what's most striking is how variable these changes can be. Some people remain active, engaged, and vibrant into their 90s, while others experience significant decline decades earlier. This variability hints at a complex interplay between genetics, environment, lifestyle, and chance. Speaking of chance, random molecular damage, sometimes referred to as stochastic damage, also plays a major role in aging. Every cell in the body is bombarded daily by millions of molecular insults, DNA mutations, protein misfolding, lipid oxidation, and more. Most of these are repaired quickly, but not all. The damage that escapes repair gradually accumulates, contributing to the slow erosion of function. It's like copying a book by hand over and over. Eventually, the typos add up. This idea ties into the concept of entropy, a measure of disorder in a system. Living organisms constantly fight against entropy by maintaining order through energy consumption. But with age, this struggle becomes less effective. The systems falter, the repairs slow, and disorder begins to win. It's a poetic reminder that aging is not just a biological phenomenon, but a reflection of the laws of physics themselves. There are also surprising social dimensions to aging. As people grow older, their social circles often shrink, but the relationships that remain tend to be more meaningful. This selective social engagement can lead to higher life satisfaction, even as physical capacities decline. Older adults often report feeling more gratitude, less anger, and greater perspective. It's as if time carves away the unimportant, leaving only what truly matters. Yet, aging is not experienced equally by everyone. Health disparities based on race, gender, income, and geography continue to influence how people age. Women tend to live longer than men on average, but they are also more likely to experience chronic illness in old age. In many cultures, older individuals are revered and respected. In others, they are marginalized or overlooked. How society treats its elders reflects its values, and in turn, shapes the experience of aging itself. So here we are, facing a future where more people will live longer than ever before. By 2050, the number of people aged 65 and older is projected to double worldwide, reaching over 1.6 billion. This demographic shift has profound implications for healthcare, economics, and community life. Aging populations will require new models of care, support for caregivers, and policies that recognize the value and needs of older citizens. And amidst all of this, the central mystery remains. Can we slow aging, reverse it, prevent its most harmful effects? The science is advancing rapidly, but for now, aging is still an unavoidable part of the human condition. Yet that may not be such a bad thing. In every wrinkle, there's a memory. In every slower step, a story. Perhaps aging is not a battle to be fought, but a landscape to be explored. One rich with meaning, change, and the potential for growth right up until the very end. As the journey through aging continues, we begin to see it not just as a biological sequence, but as a layered transformation shaped by countless interdependent systems. These systems, from genes to gut flora, from blood flow to brain chemistry, don't simply deteriorate randomly. They follow patterns, rhythms, and feedback loops, many of which we are only now beginning to understand. Take, for instance, the concept of systemic inflammation, often described as a slow burn within the aging body. This is not the sharp, targeted inflammation you get from a cut or infection, but a chronic, low-grade activation of the immune system. As people age, their immune cells can become less effective at fighting off real threats, but more prone to mistakenly attacking the body's own tissues. This background hum of inflammation, referred to as inflammaging, has been linked to everything from heart disease and diabetes to depression and Alzheimer's. It's not just the immune system misfiring, though. The endocrine system, the network responsible for hormones, shifts gears over time in subtle yet consequential ways. Levels of sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone decline significantly with age. For women, this transition is marked by menopause, typically occurring between the ages of 45 and 55. This change doesn't just affect fertility, it influences bone density, cardiovascular risk, skin quality, and mood. Men experience a more gradual hormonal shift, often called andropause, though it's less abrupt than menopause. Testosterone levels tend to decline by about 1% per year after the age of 30. This slow erosion can lead to decreased muscle mass, fatigue, and changes in mood and libido. While hormone replacement therapy exists for both sexes, it remains a controversial and highly individualized treatment path, with risks and benefits still being debated in medical circles. Beneath these shifting hormonal landscapes, the genetic integrity of our cells is also quietly under siege. While the body has remarkable systems for DNA repair, they become less efficient with time. Errors accumulate, particularly in non-replicating cells like neurons. These mutations may not always lead to cancer or dysfunction, but they represent a kind of molecular graffiti, evidence that time has passed and systems have worn down. What's even more intriguing is the role of epigenetics, the software that tells the hardware of our genes when and how to express themselves. As we age, epigenetic marks, such as methyl groups, accumulate or disappear in places they shouldn't. This disorganized gene regulation can lead to the wrong proteins being produced at the wrong time or essential processes being turned off. Some scientists now believe that much of aging is not so much genetic damage itself, but the increasing confusion in the regulation of those genes. And yet, amid this degeneration, the body continues to perform small miracles. It's worth remembering that an 80-year-old human heart may still beat more than 100,000 times a day, pumping nearly 7,000 liters of blood. The lungs continue to expand and contract more than 20,000 times daily. The brain processes thousands of sensory signals per second, guiding movement, memory, and emotion. Even in advanced age, the human body remains a marvel of engineering and resilience. The ability to adapt to aging, to maintain function despite decline, is one of the most compelling aspects of human biology. Known as homeostatic resilience, this capacity varies widely between individuals. Some people recover quickly from illness or surgery. Others struggle with prolonged healing and instability. Identifying what drives this resilience, whether genetic, nutritional, behavioral, or social, is a major focus of current research. Lifestyle, as it turns out, has an outsized impact. One of the clearest demonstrations of this comes from the so-called blue zones, regions of the world where people live significantly longer and healthier lives than average. These include Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Ikaria in Greece, Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and Loma Linda in California. The people in these zones often reached 90 or even 100 years old, with relatively low rates of chronic disease. Their secrets. It's not one thing, but a cluster of habits: plant-heavy diets, regular physical activity, social engagement, a sense of purpose, low stress, and moderate caloric intake. These populations don't follow extreme fitness routines or count every calorie. Instead, they move naturally throughout the day, gardening, walking, cooking, climbing stairs. Their meals are simple, home-cooked, and shared with others. Their social ties are strong, and their daily lives are imbued with ritual and meaning. Another dimension of aging is mental plasticity, the brain's ability to change, adapt, and grow. While it's true that the brain loses volume with age, it never stops changing entirely. Neurogenesis, or the creation of new neurons, continues into adulthood in certain areas of the brain, like the hippocampus. The rate is lower than in youth, but it's not zero. More importantly, the brain maintains a remarkable capacity for neuroplasticity, the rewiring of existing connections in response to experience, learning, and environment. This plasticity is why older adults can still learn new languages, master musical instruments, or take on complex problem-solving tasks. It may take longer and require more repetition, but the potential is there. Mental exercise, much like physical exercise, helps preserve function and delay decline. Activities like reading, writing, puzzles, games, and even social debates stimulate the brain in powerful ways. Interestingly, purpose and mental engagement may do more than just sharpen the mind, they may also extend life. Several long-term studies have found that people who report having a strong sense of purpose live longer than those who don't, even after controlling for other factors like income and education. Purpose acts as a psychological buffer, helping people navigate stress, recover from setbacks, and stay socially and physically active. On a molecular level, caloric restriction continues to draw attention. First studied extensively in the 1930s. This approach involves reducing calorie intake by about 20 to 40% without causing malnutrition. In many animal models, from worms to rodents to monkeys, this has been shown to extend lifespan, sometimes dramatically. In humans, the data are less conclusive, but several markers of aging do seem to improve with reduced caloric intake, including insulin sensitivity, inflammation, and blood pressure. That said, caloric restriction is not a silver bullet. For many, it's neither sustainable nor enjoyable. The goal has shifted toward mimicking the effects of caloric restriction through compounds like resveratrol, metformin, or rapamycin. These drugs target pathways like MTO and AMPK, which are involved in cellular growth, repair, and energy balance. Early trials show promise, but long-term safety and effectiveness in humans are still under investigation. Meanwhile, science fiction edges closer to reality in the realm of rejuvenation therapies. One frontier is cellular reprogramming, where scientists use factors that return adult cells to a more youthful stem cell-like state. In mice, partial reprogramming has reversed some signs of aging without causing cancer, a previous concern. With this technique, the dream is to one day reset the biological age of cells without losing their identity or function. Aging also brings changes in emotional regulation. Older adults tend to react less intensely to negative stimuli and recover faster from stress. They are more likely to focus on positive experiences and filter out the negative. This positivity bias may be partly biological, linked to changes in brain structure and hormone levels, but it also seems to be learned. Experience teaches that many things once perceived as urgent are, in fact, not. This emotional intelligence often peaks later in life, contributing to a kind of psychological flowering that is easy to overlook in discussions of decline. So where does all this leave us? We live in bodies that begin to age from the moment we are born, yet we also inhabit minds that can grow deeper, wiser, and more resilient as the years unfold. Aging is both a challenge and a teacher. It humbles us, but also rewards those who adapt. It is not a single disease to be cured, but a universal transition to be understood, managed, and, perhaps, reimagined. Whether through lifestyle changes, new therapies, or simply reframing how we think about getting older, the science of aging is no longer just about surviving longer. It's about thriving longer, with clarity, energy, dignity, and joy. One of the lesser-known aspects of aging lies in how our cells talk to one another. Throughout our lives, trillions of cells communicate constantly, sending molecular messages to coordinate repair, growth, and defense. This cellular chatter is essential to keeping the body functional. But as we age, those messages can become garbled, incomplete, or even harmful. This disruption in cellular communication contributes to many of the symptoms and diseases associated with aging. A key player in this breakdown is a process known as cellular senescence. Senescent cells are like retired workers who have stopped doing their jobs but refuse to leave the office. They no longer divide or contribute to tissue health, yet they remain metabolically active and often secrete inflammatory substances, growth factors, and enzymes that degrade surrounding tissue. This collection of secretions is called the senescence-associated secretory phenotype, or SASP. SASP may have originally evolved as a protective mechanism. When a cell experiences too much damage, whether from radiation, toxins, or repeated replication, it enters a senescent state to prevent turning cancerous. In youth, the immune system clears these cells efficiently. But with age, the immune system weakens and senescent cells begin to accumulate. They poison their surroundings, impair regeneration, and contribute to tissue dysfunction. In lab animals, removing these zombie cells has led to improvements in health span and even lifespan. Scientists are now investigating senolytic drugs, compounds that selectively kill senescent cells. In mice, treatment with senolytics has improved physical function, increased resistance to disease, and extended lifespan by as much as 36%. Early human trials are underway, but challenges remain. Not all senescent cells are bad. Some play beneficial roles in wound healing and tissue repair, so precision is crucial. The dream is to develop therapies that prune only the harmful cells without disturbing useful ones. This raises deeper questions about what we really want when we talk about slowing aging. Is the goal to live longer or to stay healthy for as long as possible? The distinction matters. Lifespan refers to the total number of years lived, while health span refers to the number of years lived in good health, free from significant disease or disability. For most people, extending health span is far more desirable than simply prolonging life. In fact, The last decade of life is often where the greatest suffering occurs. Many older adults spend these years battling multiple chronic diseases, undergoing repeated hospitalizations, and coping with cognitive decline or physical frailty. The burden on caregivers, families, and healthcare systems is immense. A focus on extending health span rather than merely lifespan could improve the quality of life for millions while reducing societal costs. One intriguing approach to this goal is through regenerative medicine, which seeks to repair or replace damaged tissues and organs. Advances in tissue engineering, stem cell therapy, and 3D bioprinting are beginning to blur the line between science, fiction, and clinical reality. Scientists have already printed rudimentary human tissues like skin, cartilage, and blood vessels. In the future, it might be possible to replace worn-out joints, corneas, or even organs using a person's own cells. Meanwhile, gene editing tools like CRISPR are opening new doors for preventing or correcting age-related diseases at their root. While editing the human genome comes with serious ethical concerns, especially when applied to embryos, somatic cell editing, changing genes in adult tissues, holds potential for treating conditions like muscular dystrophy, certain cancers, and even inherited forms of blindness. Still, there is no gene, pill, or procedure that can override the complex interplay of systems that define aging. That complexity is part of what makes aging so difficult to study. It's not one problem, it's thousands. And many of these problems are not isolated. A change in the brain might affect sleep. Poor sleep might worsen metabolism. Metabolic issues might accelerate vascular aging, and so on. Aging is not a single domino falling, but a network of dominoes toppling in unpredictable directions. Yet, patterns do emerge. For example, frailty, a condition marked by decreased strength, endurance, and physiological function, is a strong predictor of adverse outcomes in older adults. Frailty increases the risk of falls, hospitalization, and mortality. It's not defined by age, but by vulnerability. Two 8-year-olds might look very different. One robust and active, the other weak and dependent. The difference often lies in physical activity, nutrition, and mental health. Prevention, then, becomes paramount. Strength training has emerged as one of the most effective interventions to reduce frailty. It improves muscle mass, bone density, balance, and insulin sensitivity. Even people in their 90s can gain strength and mobility through resistance exercises. Balance training, such as Tai Chi or yoga, can also reduce the risk of falls, a leading cause of injury and death in older populations. Equally important is the role of mental and emotional resilience. Depression, anxiety, and loneliness are not just emotional experiences. They have biological consequences. Chronic psychological stress can increase cortisol levels, damage hippocampal neurons, suppress immune function, and accelerate telomere shortening. Telomeres are the protective caps on the ends of chromosomes that shorten with each cell division. They are often seen as a biological clock for cellular aging. People with chronic stress, poor sleep, or inadequate social support tend to have shorter telomeres. However, the good news is that telomere shortening may be modified. Several studies have shown that lifestyle changes, including a healthy diet, regular exercise, stress reduction, and social connection, can stabilize or even slightly lengthen telomeres over time. While the exact mechanisms are still under investigation, this provides a hopeful message. Our choices matter. There is also a growing recognition that aging is not a failure. For much of medical history, old age was seen as an enemy, a disease to be conquered, a decline to be delayed. But a new narrative is emerging, one that views aging as a natural, meaningful part of life's arc. This shift is reflected in public health campaigns, elder advocacy, and even the arts. In many cultures, older adults are repositories of wisdom, history, and social continuity. They serve as caregivers, volunteers, mentors, and storytellers. Their contributions extend far beyond economics. In fact, studies have found that older adults who engage in purposeful activities, whether through community service, education, or creative expression, enjoy better mental and physical health than those who do not. This brings us to the psychology of legacy. As people age, they often become more concerned with what they leave behind. Memories, teachings, values, and tangible contributions. This desire to create a lasting impact is known as generativity, a term coined by psychologist Erik Erikson. It reflects a mature sense of responsibility for the well-being of future generations. Generativity can take many forms: raising grandchildren, planting trees, teaching skills, or simply passing on stories. The legacy mindset may explain why. Some older adults remain so mentally and physically vibrant. Their sense of purpose fuels activity, curiosity, and engagement with the world. This mental posture can be a powerful counterweight to decline, keeping the brain and body in motion. Of course, none of this erases the real challenges of aging: pain, loss, vulnerability. But it adds dimension to the picture. It says that aging is not simply the act of fading, but also the possibility of flowering into something different. Something more introspective, more enduring, even more generous. Ultimately, the science of aging doesn't just teach us how to live longer, it teaches us how to live better. It invites us to see our bodies not as enemies, but as lifelong companions. It reminds us that time, while often unkind, also brings gifts, resilience, perspective, connection. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches us that the question isn't whether we age, it's how. In the quiet march of time, aging progresses not as a single sweeping event, but as a layered symphony of internal shifts, genetic, cellular, emotional, and societal. As each layer unfolds, we uncover deeper insights into how we live, why we change, and what might be possible in the years ahead. This is where the frontier of biogerontology now finds itself, not merely mapping the terrain of decline, but exploring the ways in which aging can be redefined, perhaps even re-engineered. One fascinating avenue of exploration is the role of metabolism in aging. Our metabolic rate, the speed at which our bodies burn energy, declines gradually with age. This is not simply because we move less, even when activity is accounted for. Older bodies tend to use energy less efficiently. Muscle burns fewer calories than fat, and as muscle mass decreases, so does overall energy expenditure. But metabolism is about more than weight. It's about cellular power. Inside nearly every cell are mitochondria, the so-called powerhouses that convert nutrients into usable energy. These microscopic structures carry their own DNA and are responsible for producing adenosine triphosphate, the energy currency of the cell. But mitochondrial efficiency declines with age. Damaged mitochondria produce less energy and more free radicals, unstable molecules that can damage proteins, lipids, and DNA. This oxidative stress accumulates over time and contributes to cellular aging. Interestingly, mitochondria don't just passively wear out. They actively influence the cell's fate. When mitochondrial function drops too low, cells may undergo apoptosis, programmed cell death, or enter senescence. The body's ability to clear out defective mitochondria through a process called mitophagy also decreases with age, leading to a buildup of dysfunctional energy factories. This cycle, damage, decline, and poor cleanup, forms one of aging's most stubborn loops. Researchers are now looking at compounds like NAD boosters to help. NAD is a coenzyme involved in mitochondrial function and DNA repair. Its levels naturally decline with age, but boosting it in animal models has shown promise for improving energy metabolism, reducing inflammation, and even extending lifespan. Human trials are still early, but the results are being watched closely. Another area where aging exerts its influence is the immune system. which undergoes a process called immunosenescence. This is the gradual decline in immune function that makes older adults more susceptible to infections, less responsive to vaccines, and slower to recover from illness. The thymus, an organ where T cells mature, begins to shrink shortly after puberty and becomes largely inactive by middle age. As a result, the diversity of T cells diminishes and the immune system becomes less adaptable. Compounding this is a rise in chronic inflammation. As discussed earlier, inflammation quietly disrupts tissue function across the body. The combination of a weakened immune defense and a heightened inflammatory state sets the stage for age-related diseases like cancer, cardiovascular disorders, and neurodegeneration. Understanding how to modulate the immune response, calming it when overactive, and boosting it when underperforming is a key focus in anti-aging medicine. Meanwhile, the brain continues its silent metamorphosis. White matter, which consists of the nerve fibers that connect different parts of the brain, begins to deteriorate in the fourth decade of life. This slows the transmission of electrical signals, contributing to reduced cognitive speed. However, not all decline is inevitable. The concept of cognitive reserve suggests that the brain can compensate for some structural loss through enriched mental activity, education, and problem solving. Older adults who frequently engage in complex mental tasks, learning new skills, managing finances, reading extensively, show better outcomes on cognitive tests and are less likely to develop dementia. Physical exercise also boosts cognitive function by increasing blood flow to the brain, promoting the growth of new neurons and reducing inflammation. The simple act of walking, especially in natural environments, has been linked to improvements in memory and attention. Sleep, too, remains a vital pillar of aging well. While older adults may sleep fewer hours or experience more interruptions, the importance of quality sleep doesn't diminish. Sleep supports memory consolidation, hormonal regulation, and immune function. Disorders like sleep apnea and insomnia become more common with age, but they're not a normal part of aging and can often be treated. Cognitive behavioral therapy, light exposure, and consistent sleep schedules all support healthier sleep in later life. The digestive system, though less glamorous, tells its own aging story. Saliva production decreases, making chewing and swallowing more difficult. The stomach produces less acid, which can impair nutrient absorption, particularly of calcium, vitamin B12, and iron. The motility of the intestines slows, leading to more frequent constipation. Yet the digestive tract remains surprisingly adaptable. A fiber-rich diet, hydration, and physical activity can significantly improve gastrointestinal health, even in very old age. Another often overlooked area is sexual health in aging. While hormone levels change and certain physical capacities may decline, interest in intimacy often persists. The key is adaptation, discovering new ways to connect, communicate, and experience closeness. Older adults frequently report more emotional satisfaction in their sexual relationships, even if the frequency or mechanics of activity shift. Importantly, maintaining sexual health is linked to better cardiovascular function, mood, and overall well-being. Social connection continues to emerge as a powerful predictor of healthy aging. The longest-lived individuals almost always report strong ties to family, friends, or community. These connections don't have to be large in number. Depth matters more than breadth. A few close relationships can buffer stress, improve immune response, and increase resilience in the face of core illness. Isolation, on the other hand, is as dangerous as smoking or obesity when it comes to predicting early death. Purpose remains the engine of longevity. Whether it's gardening, mentoring, painting, or activism, having something to wake up for each day appears to influence everything from mood to mobility. In cultures where older people are seen as valuable contributors rather than burdens, they tend to stay more active and engaged. Purpose gives structure to time, reinforces identity, and builds routines that support health. Financial stability also intersects with aging outcomes. People with access to stable income, healthcare, and housing tend to age better than those without. This isn't just about luxury. It's about access to nutritious food, preventive care, and time for rest. Policies that support older adults. With pensions, universal healthcare, and age-friendly infrastructure can dramatically improve quality of life and reduce the burdens of aging across society. Even our senses of self evolve as we grow older. Many older adults report feeling more self-accepting, less driven by ego, and more appreciative of the small moments. This process, known in psychology as ego transcendence, is a kind of spiritual or existential maturity. It doesn't require religion, but it often involves a shift in perspective away from ambition and comparison, and toward gratitude, reflection, and connection. And yet, for all the strengths that can blossom with age, the challenges remain real. Chronic conditions like arthritis, diabetes, and macular degeneration are common. Grief becomes more frequent. The body demands more maintenance. The world moves faster than ever. But within these changes lies a quieter truth. Aging reveals who we are beneath the noise. It invites us to slow down, to listen, to live deliberately. In the end, aging is not a disease. It is not a failure of design. It is a rhythm, an arc, a story told in cells and years. And like all good stories, its meaning isn't found in the beginning or the end, but in how we choose to live the chapters in between. As the arc of aging extends further, we begin to see more clearly how time sculpts the human experience, not only biologically, but also culturally, philosophically, and ecologically. Across every civilization, ideas about aging have evolved, sometimes revering the elder as a fountain of wisdom, sometimes marginalizing age as a reminder of frailty and mortality. But in all contexts, aging has remained a universal marker of life's progression, and it continues to shape our individual and collective identities. One compelling cultural dimension of aging lies in how societies perceive older adults' roles and responsibilities. In traditional agrarian societies, elders were often the primary carriers of knowledge, entrusted with oral histories, rituals, and moral guidance. Their lived experience granted them authority, and the pace of life aligned with their capabilities. But in the modern industrial and digital world, where speed and innovation often outpace experience, aging can feel more like exile than elevation. However, this disconnection may be changing. There is growing recognition of the need for intergenerational exchange, where the curiosity of youth meets the perspective of age. Programs that connect students with retirees or tech-savvy teens, with older adults learning new skills, have shown not only cognitive and emotional benefits, but also a reduction in age-based stereotypes. Aging, in this framework, becomes less about retreating from life and more about shifting into a different mode of contribution. The contribution of older adults also extends to environmental impact and sustainability. Elder populations tend to consume less, waste less, and travel less than their younger counterparts. They often embody habits of conservation formed during periods of scarcity or war. In some regions, community gardens, recycling cooperatives, and local economies are led by retirees with deep knowledge of land and sustainability. Aging, far from being a burden on the earth, may offer models of how to live more mindfully with it. This mindful living intersects with another growing area, gerotranscendence, a psychological theory suggesting that as people age, they naturally shift from materialistic concerns toward deeper, more existential reflection. They begin to question not just how long they will live, but why they have lived, what they have learned, and what they can leave behind. Time becomes less a countdown and more a canvas. In this mindset, regrets often surface, but so does forgiveness. Relationships that once felt fractured may be healed. Individuals may reevaluate their faith, values, or legacy. In this phase, many find peace not in prolonging life indefinitely, but in accepting its impermanence with grace and gratitude. And yet, the biology of aging marches on, indifferent to philosophy. As we reach the later decades of life, physiological changes become more pronounced. The skeletal system, for example, continues to lose density. Osteopenia, a precursor to osteoporosis, affects nearly half of adults over age 50. The risk of fractures increases, especially in the hips, spine, and wrists. Even minor falls can result in serious injuries. The nervous system also continues its subtle transformation. Reflexes may slow. Balance can become unstable as proprioception, the body's sense of its position in space, diminishes. Hearing loss accelerates, particularly at high frequencies, making conversation in noisy environments difficult. Vision may decline due to cataracts or macular degeneration, further limiting mobility and independence. But these declines, while real, are not absolute. Adaptive tools, technology, and therapy can compensate. Hearing aids, cataract surgery, balance exercises, and mobility training all extend functionality. The aging body, while less robust, remains adaptable when given the right support. This is where technology meets aging in powerful ways. In recent years, the rise of assistive technologies has transformed how older adults live. Smart home devices that control lights, doors, and appliances reduce physical strain. Wearable monitors track vital signs and detect falls, alerting caregivers in real time. Virtual assistants can remind users to take medications, make calls, or even provide companionship through conversation simulations. Robotics and artificial intelligence are now entering elder care. In Japan, robotic pets and humanoid assistants have been introduced into long-term care facilities, helping reduce loneliness and stimulate interaction. In other countries, remote patient monitoring allows doctors to track chronic conditions without the need for constant hospital visits. These technologies are not replacing human care, but extending its reach, especially in aging societies with caregiver shortages. Yet the most powerful support for aging comes not from machines, but from human connection. Caregiving, whether by family, friends, or professionals, forms the backbone of elder well-being. It is a role filled with love, stress, sacrifice, and deep meaning. The burden often falls disproportionately on women, many of whom are caring for both children and parents simultaneously, a phenomenon known as the sandwich generation. Support for caregivers is a growing concern. Burnout is common, and without adequate social or financial support, caregivers can experience depression, health decline, and economic hardship. Recognizing caregiving as both labor and emotional investment is essential in designing policies that support the full circle of aging, not just the aged, but those who care for them. Beyond care and connection, nutrition plays a fundamental role in shaping how we age. The aging digestive system requires fewer calories, but more nutrient density. Deficiencies in vitamins D, B12, calcium, and omega-3 fatty acids are common in older adults and contribute to bone loss, cognitive decline, and immune dysfunction. Hydration is another challenge, as the sensation of thirst diminishes with age, leading to a higher risk of dehydration. Many experts advocate for diets rich in vegetables, legumes, whole grains, fish, nuts, and healthy fats, patterns common in Mediterranean and Okinawan cultures, both known for longevity. Antioxidants and colorful fruits and vegetables may help reduce oxidative stress. Plant polyphenols, found in foods like berries, green tea, and dark chocolate, are under study for their potential to protect brain and heart health. Exercise remains a cornerstone. But for older adults, the goal shifts from performance to preservation. Walking, stretching, strength training, And balance exercises are recommended not just for physical benefits, but for psychological ones. Movement stimulates circulation, enhances sleep, improves mood, and combats anxiety. Even modest activity, like gardening, dancing, or climbing stairs, has a cumulative effect. In one long-term study, older adults who walked just 15 minutes a day had significantly lower rates of heart disease, stroke, and dementia. Physical independence is one of the greatest predictors of life satisfaction in older adults. Maintaining it, even at modest levels, brings dignity and confidence. While the body continues to adapt and endure, the mind often seeks closure and coherence. Many older adults turn to storytelling, not only to share memories, but to make sense of them. Life review therapy used in elder psychology helps individuals revisit and reframe their experiences, reducing depression and enhancing life satisfaction. Writing memoirs, recording family histories, or creating photo albums are acts of meaning-making that reinforce identity and belonging. This narrative function of aging reveals something profound. We are not just biological beings undergoing mechanical decline. We are storytellers shaping our own legacy with each decision, memory, and connection. The marks of age, wrinkles, gray hair, slowed steps, become punctuation in a long, richly written sentence. So, aging is not simply the closing of a book, but the writing of its final and often most reflective chapters. The science of aging gives us the tools to write those chapters with clarity and care. The philosophy of aging gives us the language to give them meaning. And though time cannot be reversed, it can be understood. Through that understanding, the years ahead become not something to fear, but something to honor. Something to live into. As the final chapters of life come into clearer focus, aging continues to unfold in both predictable and deeply personal ways. It is in these later stages that the science, philosophy, and lived experience of aging converge most powerfully. The body moves more slowly. The memory may falter. The days might feel quieter. But within this stillness lies one of the most profound transformations in the human journey. The turning inward, the distillation of decades into perspective, and the quiet triumph of endurance. Biologically, the signs of advanced aging become unmistakable. Mobility declines as joints lose flexibility and muscles weaken. Cartilage thins, reducing shock absorption in knees, hips, and spine. Osteoarthritis, one of the most common conditions in people over 70, causes stiffness, pain, and reduced range of motion. While not life-threatening, it can severely limit independence. Canes, walkers, and adaptive shoes become common tools, not symbols of weakness, but of continued agency. The cardiovascular system, too, shows where the walls of arteries stiffen further, increasing blood pressure and making the heart work harder. The heart muscle may thicken, but its capacity to pump efficiently can decline. Conditions like atrial fibrillation and congestive heart failure become more prevalent. Yet even here, interventions, both pharmaceutical and lifestyle-based, can sustain vitality. Cardiac rehab programs, dietary adjustments, and gentle exercise help many older adults remain active participants in life. One of the more complex challenges in later life is cognitive decline. Memory lapses are common, but when they interfere with daily activities, they may signal something deeper: mild cognitive impairment or dementia. Alzheimer's disease, the most common form of dementia, affects roughly 1 in 9 people over age 65. Its progression can span years, marked by confusion, mood changes, and a gradual loss of recognition, even of close family. Despite the fear it invokes, cognitive decline is not inevitable. Brain scans show that many older adults maintain dense neural connections and robust memory even into their 90s. The difference often lies in protective factors: education, social engagement, mental stimulation, cardiovascular health, and even bilingualism. There is growing evidence that maintaining a sense of curiosity, learning new skills, and staying socially active all builds cognitive reserve, which helps the brain resist damage longer. Equally significant in this phase of life is emotional processing. While physical and mental faculties may wane, emotional complexity often deepens. Older adults tend to ruminate less on stress, savor small pleasures more fully, and approach relationships with greater patience. Gratitude, forgiveness, and compassion are emotional states that emerge with surprising strength, even in the face of loss. Many report feeling more emotionally stable, even when the body is frailer. This phenomenon has been supported by studies showing increased activity in areas of the brain responsible for emotional regulation in older adults compared to younger ones. It's as though the aging brain, even while shrinking in volume, grows in wisdom. Older individuals often report a stronger connection to nature, music, art, and memory. Time no longer rushes, it resonates. Yet aging also brings a growing proximity to death, a topic both scientific and spiritual. While death is often viewed as the end of life, in many aging individuals, it becomes an integrated part of living. They prepare not just logistically, through wills, advanced directives, and estate planning, but emotionally and psychologically. This process of preparation can bring immense peace. Palliative care and hospice, once thought of as purely end-of-life services, are now being recognized as essential components of healthy aging. These services prioritize comfort, autonomy, and dignity rather than cure. Studies have shown that patients receiving early palliative care often live longer with better quality of life than those receiving aggressive interventions. And there are moments of grace here, too. Older adults facing terminal conditions often speak with surprising clarity about meaning. Many express satisfaction not in what they achieved, but in who they became, in how they loved, in what they endured, in the small, everyday moments, a morning cup of tea, a bird singing at dusk, the touch of a hand. As life narrows, attention often shifts to legacy. Some find fulfillment in mentoring, teaching, or volunteering. Others write their memoirs, curate photo albums, or share life lessons with grandchildren. Many choose to downsize, simplify, and divest possessions, passing on not just things, but values. Legacy is not just what one leaves behind, it's what one instills in others while still here. At the same time, spiritual reflection deepens. Whether within organized religion or personal philosophy, many older individuals explore questions of existence, connection, and transcendence. Some return to beliefs from childhood. Others discover new frameworks. What they often seek is not certainty, but coherence. A sense that their life, with all its chaos and contradiction, had shape and meaning. Interestingly, studies show that spiritual well-being is correlated with better physical and emotional health in older adults. Those with a strong sense of spiritual connection tend to report lower levels of pain, depression, and anxiety. They are also more likely to engage in self-care and experience greater life satisfaction. This suggests that spirituality, broadly defined, may be an essential component of aging well. Meanwhile, technology continues to evolve to meet the needs of aging populations. From AI-based companionship tools that reduce loneliness to virtual reality experiences that allow homebound seniors to revisit favorite places or explore new ones. The integration of digital tools into elder life is accelerating. These technologies, if used ethically and inclusively, could radically improve well-being in later years. Yet no matter how advanced our tools become, aging remains an intensely human experience. It is about remembering more names than faces, about seeing reflections that look older than the person one feels inside. It's about longing for those who are gone while still finding joy in what remains. Aging is walking more slowly, but noticing more as you go. It is less about becoming and more about being In the end, science may one day extend the human lifespan dramatically. But even now, it offers something more profound, an invitation to understand, accept, and embrace the process of aging. Not as a decline to be feared, but as a transformation to be respected. Not as a loss of youth, but as a gain in depth. Aging is not the closing of life's story, it is the writing of its conclusion with greater intentionality, insight, and grace. And for those willing to listen closely, it speaks not just of endings, but of wisdom, clarity, and love. In the final layers of understanding aging, we arrive at a convergence where science meets memory, where biology gives way to reflection, and where the body, once young and restless, now stands still enough to reveal truths only visible through time. These truths are not found in formulas or medical textbooks, but in the quiet accumulation of experience, the stories etched into skin and gaze, the patterns of behavior that persist even as the world changes around us. The aging body, once considered a passive victim of entropy, is now seen through a more nuanced lens. We no longer simply ask, why does the body decay? But also, how does it endure? For within the limitations of aging lies a quiet but powerful resilience, a biological will to adapt, conserve, and recalibrate. Consider the skin, that outermost record of time. Wrinkles, sunspots, and thinning may suggest fragility, but skin remains a dynamic organ. It continues to defend against microbes, regulate temperature, and even synthesize vitamin D with sun exposure, albeit less efficiently. Collagen production slows, and elastin loses its snap, but the skin still repairs itself after cuts and bruises, even in advanced age. Moisturization, gentle cleansing, and sun protection may not reverse time, but they do preserve dignity and comfort. The kidneys and liver, though often overlooked in aging discussions, carry on with astounding tenacity. The kidneys filter blood, regulate fluid balance, and manage electrolytes with decreasing nephron function. The liver, crucial for detoxification, drug metabolism, and nutrient storage, maintains its roles well into the later decades of life, unless challenged by disease. These organs, like quiet custodians, work behind the scenes to keep internal harmony intact. Even the reproductive system, long associated with youth, does not vanish in relevance with menopause or andropause. While reproductive capacity fades, hormonal influence continues through other systems. Estrogen and testosterone decline, but their residues still shape mood, bone health, and fat distribution. And in some cases, post-reproductive life is not a deficit, but an evolutionary feature. The grandmother hypothesis suggests that human longevity beyond fertility evolved precisely because elders contribute to the survival of younger generations, not with reproduction, but with wisdom and care. This hypothesis is not merely academic. It is supported by anthropological observations across cultures. Older adults often serve as caregivers, advisors, and moral anchors. In multi-generational households, they transmit language, ritual, and resilience. And when disasters strike, economic, environmental, or emotional, they are often the ones who remain calm, steady, and resourceful. But as much as the science of aging explores function, its emotional counterpart is acceptance. There comes a point when maintaining youth becomes less important than sustaining meaning. When ambition gives way to reflection. When identity is not about what one does, but what one represents. And this is where end-of-life planning emerges, not as a grim task, but as an act of autonomy. Advanced care directives, living wills, and conversations about death are increasingly encouraged by physicians and psychologists alike. Far from signaling hopelessness, they often bring peace. Patients who articulate their values and preferences tend to experience less anxiety, less unnecessary treatment, and more dignity in their final days. Death in this light is not the opposite of life, but its completion. Just as birth is a beginning. We don't remember, Death is a conclusion we rarely witness until it draws near. In aging, we are given the rare privilege of glimpsing both edges of existence. This perspective is both humbling and liberating. One of the greatest challenges in advanced age is loss of loved ones, abilities, roles, and sometimes identity. Grief is not an isolated event, but a companion to aging. It arrives not just with death, but with change, the end of a career, the move from a family home, the last time one can drive. And yet, within these losses, people often find new expressions of self. Creative pursuits, painting, poetry, music, blossom in retirement. Travel becomes slower but more intentional. Friendship circles grow smaller but deeper. Even solitude, once feared, becomes a source of calm. Many report feeling freer to speak their minds, wear what they want, or live on their own terms. Aging, when embraced, becomes an art form in itself. The language of aging also matters. Words like decline or burden shape perception, but so do words like season, ripening, and wisdom. In languages like Japanese and Korean, there are nuanced honorifics for elders, reflecting esteem rather than pity. In these cultural models, aging is not pathology, it is maturity realized. In healthcare, the shift from disease-oriented to person-centered care is gaining traction. Doctors and caregivers are trained not just to treat symptoms, but to understand the individual. What brings joy? What causes fear? What a good day looks like. This shift is subtle but profound. It restores dignity even when cure is no longer possible, and as science peers further into the future, radical interventions inch closer to reality. Companies are experimenting with partial cellular reprogramming, aiming to reverse biological age in tissues. Trials are underway to test gene therapies that delay age-associated diseases. Some scientists even speak of the longevity escape. Velocity, the point at which for every year we live, medical advances grant us more than a year of life in return. Yet most researchers agree, extending health span is the real priority. A life extended without vitality is not a gift, but a strain. So the goal remains to make later years not just longer, but more mobile, connected, lucid, and meaningful. And in that mission, the tools are surprisingly simple: movement, connection, curiosity, sleep, nutrition, purpose. These are not futuristic drugs, they are ancient habits. They do not promise immortality. They offer quality, and they are accessible. Now, in answering the question, why do we age? Science tells us it is a process shaped by genetics, entropy, evolution, and environment. But in answering, how do we age well? We find that the answers lie not in microscopes, but in how we live each moment. Perhaps that is aging's final gift, not just insight into how the body changes, but an invitation to appreciate time as it passes. To live deliberately, to love wisely, to let go gracefully. Thank you for watching this video from the Sleepless Scientist. We hope it offered not just information, but a sense of peace, understanding, and even inspiration. We are grateful for your time and presence, and we truly apologize if this exploration kept you awake or made sleep harder tonight. If you're still with us, it means your curiosity is beautifully persistent. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from and what time it is there. We always love hearing your voices from across the world. Now, as your body settles and your mind drifts, let the gentle soundscape that follows carry you toward rest. No pressure, no urgency. Just time unfolding, breath by breath, in perfect rhythm. Good night.